Hi people, it's me, Anja. My pronouns all she and her, and welcome back to my channel for a new recent release video. I had such high hopes for March as a reading month just because so many of my most anticipated new releases were coming out in March, such as Oathbound and Sunrise on the Reaping, but as you know, both of those disappointed me, unfortunately. So anyway, I hope to finish strong with March and go into April with like lower expectations. I know I already filmed my April TBR, and then with my April TBR, I like skipped all of my most anticipated releases that were coming out in April. So basically, all of the books that I talked about in my April TBR, I have more like 4-star expectations for them than 5-star, if that really makes any sense. But anyway, here we are. So the first book on this list is called Hangry. This story is a YA contemporary following two Asian main characters whose families don't really like each other, but they used to. Does that make any sense? And now they have rivaling food businesses, and frankly, I don't really like this premise to begin with. I think this whole like Romeo and Juliet trend of like grandparents or parents having beef and then forbidding their children from like seeing each other is so stupid, and it's so immature. Just because you have trauma with someone, which is totally understandable and valid, doesn't mean that you should project that trauma onto their children who are completely new people and who are completely innocent. You know? I don't know if that makes any sense at all. But basically, the writing was so clunky and so weird, and I didn't like it. I don't like the premise to begin with, like I just said. The two characters themselves felt kind of flat, and the whole emotional baggage, like I didn't like the resolution because the stakes just weren't very high. However, I do appreciate like the queer representation because the male lead is also transgender. We love to see it. Second of all, I don't really think they had any romantic chemistry, but I do really like their friendship overall. The plot was kind of okay. You know what I mean? I don't know. I rated this book 3 stars. I enjoyed the food element though. So anyway, with that said, take that as you will. The next book on this list is called 13 Ways to Say Goodbye. This story is a middle-grade contemporary following a young queer main character who is navigating life after loss, and basically she's like filling out her sister's before birthday like bucket list almost in Pérez because her sister passed away right before she was supposed to turn 13, and now the main character is now 13 as well. So she's like doing all these things that her sister never got to do. And it's been 3 years since she's passed away. And like she's also navigating the idea of like learning to love again and having a crush on one of her classmates because she's currently on a school trip in Paris. Does that make any sense? I feel like I gave too much information away, but also enough information for you to really understand the premise and the context of the story. But I'm not quite sure also because sometimes I've been given like criticism and feedback that like my synopses for books are too vague. So anyway, I thought this book was excellent. I really enjoyed it so much. As we all know, I love stories in free verse. I'm way overdue for a book recommendation about books set in free verse, I know. Second of all, I loved the Paris setting. I love the plot. I love the fish out of water trope. The sapphic romance was so cute and so adorable. I loved the characters. I loved the memories and the sister relationship and everything. This book is so good and it's so wholesome. Anyway, with that said, I rated the story 4 out of 5 stars, and I would definitely highly recommend it. The next book on this list is called Camila Núñez's Year of Disasters. This story is a YA contemporary following a queer Cuban-American main character who's very worried about her future, especially when her best friend gives her a tarot reading right before her birthday. This story is absolutely so excellent and it's so well done. I had no idea what to expect because I think this book is a debut, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, it is the first book that I've ever read before by this author. I think it's so good. I loved the characters, the queer representation, the plot, the best friendship, the characters. I really love these coming of age stories from a queer perspective, from a POC perspective, from both together. Like, I really appreciated, like, the intersectionality. This book is excellent. I love the queer representation. I think this book is so underrated and it's so good. And I was truly hooked from the beginning to the end. Like, this book was so digestible and it was so awesome and emotional and just well done. And I just really appreciated it so much. So anyway, with that said, I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely highly recommend it. The next book on this list is called How to Survive a Slasher. This story is a YA horror contemporary following a survival of a serial killer as history starts to repeat itself. Does that make any sense? I don't know if it does, but anyway, this book was so good. And I just really enjoyed it so much. I had really low expectations for it because I thought this book would remind me too much of that Joelle Washington book, The Blonde Dies First, which I DNF'd whenever that book came out. But this book was so good. I sped through it very quickly because I just really enjoyed it so much. And I realized that my issue with The Blonde Dies First is that it was too on the nose and there were way too many characters. Whereas in this book, I just really appreciated the trio of friendship. I loved the characters so much. I loved the queer representation. The main character is genderqueer and bisexual, by the way. This story is excellent. I loved her family dynamics. Everything about it made so much sense. And the mystery itself is so well paced and so good. Like, this book is excellent and I just really enjoyed it so much. It was the right amount of, like, emotions paired with the thrill. And, like, everything about it was so well done and so good. So anyway, with that said, I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars. And I would definitely highly recommend it. The next book on this list is called One Step Forward. This story is a YA historical fiction following a young main character, and it's a fictionalized version of Matilda Young, who is one of the youngest American suffragists to be imprisoned for picketing the White House to demand a woman's right to vote. And honestly, like, I enjoyed this book. I had never heard of Matilda Young before, so I didn't really know what to expect from, like, her personal life or anything like that. But from a historical perspective, I kind of knew what to expect. And I think that I would definitely enjoyed this book way more if I had read it when I was younger. Because when I was younger, I wasn't really aware of all the minutiae of this fight, if that makes any sense. Because, like, when I was younger and I learned that 1920 or whenever was the year that, like, women won the right to vote, I didn't really understand that, like, that meant that only white women won the right to vote at that time. And then, like, later on, indigenous people and black people won the right to vote. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes any sense, but basically, when I read historical fiction, I prefer to read about stories about people that look like me. Does that make any sense? Because it's just more relatable and, like, I don't know. Does that make any sense? I don't know if it does or not, and that's not exactly the fault of the author or the story or anything like that. It's just a personal preference. So anyway, with that said, I rated this book 3 out of 5 stars. I did enjoy, like, the in-verse format. As we all know, as previously discussed, I love free-verse stories, and I enjoyed the characters and everything, and the idea that, like, revolution doesn't happen overnight, obviously. It's just that I would have preferred, like, more, I don't know, a more nuanced, intersectionalized perspective. I don't know if that makes any sense. But anyway, I rated the story 3 stars, so take that as you will. The last book on this list, and definitely not the least, because we already talked about the least on this list, which was the first book on this list, but anyway, is Lovely, Dark, and Deep. This story is a YA dark academia following a young, queer Filipino main character who is navigating magic, loneliness, and the power of found family. This book is technically, I would say, like a portal fantasy, if you know what I mean. I don't know if people really understand what a portal fantasy is, but basically, it's a fantasy where, like, the characters exist in fantasy, but, like, modern day also exists away from it. You know, like an urban fantasy would mean that the fantastical elements and the contemporary elements intermingle and interact, but like she attends a magical school on a secret island where like the mundane can't exactly access it. You know what I mean? Similarly to how like Hogwarts isn't accessible to the muggles. Does that make any sense? I would also categorize Percy Jackson as a portal fantasy since, again, Camp Half-Blood can't really be seen by non-half-bloods. Does that make any sense? But anyway, I digress. I think this book was so good and so awesome. First of all, I loved the setting. I love an academic setting. The setting was so atmospheric and so well detailed. The characters are so well developed and so distinct. I love the found family. I loved the queer representation. Like, this book is excellent. I love the friendship and the characters and the plot, and everything about it was so well done and so good. This book is so excellent, and I think I had really low expectations prior, just because I rated both of the author's 2 books, like previously, 3 stars, so I was quite surprised when I rated this book 4 stars, but I was so invested in the mystery and the plot and the world building and the characters and everything. So anyway, with that said, I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars, and I would definitely highly, highly recommend it. So in the beginning of this video, I complained about March not being a very good reading month just because, like, the majority of my most anticipated releases have been disappointing me lately, but then I just read a slew of really good books. So basically what we're learning in 2025 lately is to lower your expectations. And maybe, like, I don't know, maybe that's not the lesson, because sometimes books do meet my high expectations. It's just that sometimes they don't. You know what I mean? But anyway, in conclusion, if you enjoy this video, please don't hesitate to give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below the newspaper emoji if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you're new, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!